The dog was nothing but bones and blood when it staggered into the station lot. Matted fur clinging to its ribs, a chain still looped around its neck like a noose. Officer Clay Mercer had seen plenty of strays in his 20 years with the sheriff's department, but something in the animal's eyes stopped him cold. Not fear, not hunger, urgency, like it had come for someone. Or something. When it limped away down the tree line and paused to look back, Clay grabbed his coat, left his coffee steaming on the hood of the cruiser, and followed. You know where stories like this go, but this one might stay with you. If it does, stay with us. The pine forest behind Copeland County didn't see much foot traffic. Once the last sawmill closed down, the undergrowth had taken over years ago, choking out old hunting paths, swallowing rusted deer blinds, reclaiming the bones of cabins. Locals called it God's Elbow because the ridgeline curled like a crooked arm over the town's west end. But no one went up there anymore, not since the cave-in. Officer Clay Mercer trudged behind the dog, one hand resting on his sidearm, the other brushing aside branches that clawed at his jacket. The animal was slow but determined, sniffing once in a while at the soil, like it was following a scent even it didn't trust. "Where the hell are you going, boy?" Clay muttered. The dog glanced back at him. Just once. Its eyes were a pale, almost clouded blue. Old eyes. Haunted. Clay had logged 16 shifts this month, 2 overtime, 3 solo. The budget cuts meant fewer deputies and more gaps to cover. He hadn't slept more than 5 hours straight in weeks. He told himself that's why he was doing this, why he hadn't radioed in. Fatigue made you soft in the head. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just that. He needed to get away from people. From Emily's voicemail still sitting unopened on his phone. From the growing ache in his chest that he wouldn't name. The dog veered left, into a part of the forest Clay didn't recognize. The pines grew thinner here, the ground rising into a ridge. He caught a whiff of something, earthy and coppery, like wet iron. Blood? No, odor. Animal maybe. When the dog stopped, it was in front of a dark mouth set into the side of the slope. A cave. Clay slowed, hand dropping instinctively to the flashlight clipped to his belt. "I'm not going there without backup," he said aloud, not really to the dog. The dog sat, stared at him. Clay sighed, pulled his radio from his chest strap. Static. He shifted. Tried again. Still static. He stepped forward. The cave opened like a wound in the rock, no wider than a doorway, but taller than a man. Inside it was black, the kind of black that swallowed light whole. Clay unholstered his flashlight, clicked it on. The beam shook a little as he lifted it. Just damp rock. Dirt. Nothing unusual. But the smell hit him like a slap. Rot. Urine. Something worse. He hesitated, then crouched and shined the light lower. Scrape marks. Thin grooves carved into the stone. Claw marks? No, too narrow. Like something had been dragged. Many times. The dog whined softly behind him. Clay swallowed and stepped inside. The ceiling dipped almost immediately, forcing him crouch. The beam of light caught old wooden beams, half buried in mud and rot. Shack supports from the old mining days. He remembered stories about a silver shaft collapsing in the early 1900s. 2 men buried alive, never recovered. He pressed forward. After 20 feet, the cave widened slightly and the floor evened out. There were signs someone had been here. Trash, a moldy sleeping bag, tin cans stacked like totems. A low groan echoed from deeper inside. Clay froze. It wasn't the wind. It was human. He moved forward, breath shallow now, light trembling as he swept the beam ahead. A narrow passage veered left, partially obscured by loose boards and rock. He squeezed through, catching his shoulder on the edge. The smell got worse, closer now, ripe and human. Then the flashlight caught his shape. Clay stopped cold. In the corner, slumped against a stone wall, was a girl, maybe 10 years old, wrapped in a filthy blanket, eyes sunken but alert. Her hair was matted and clumped, skin a grayish pallor. She didn't move as the light landed on her, just blinked slowly. Jesus Christ, Clay crouched, voice cracking. Hey, it's okay. I'm a cop. You're safe now." She didn't answer, just watched him. He pulled the radio. Static again. He checked for a pulse, faint but there. Behind her, he saw it. A second bundle. A smaller child, barely breathing. Twins? He turned back toward the cave mouth. "I need help," he shouted. "I found—" A sound cut him off. A low, rasping growl. Not the dog. Something deeper inside the cave. Clay turned, light swinging wildly as he pulled his sidearm. The growl faded, replaced by a shuffling sound. Something retreating. The flashlight flickered. No, no, no. Darkness. Then silence. He turned back to the children. The girl hadn't moved, but her lips parted. Her voice was barely audible. He said not to scream, or the monster would hear. Clay's blood went cold. "Who said that?" he whispered. "She blinked. The man who left us." Clay stood slowly. "How long have you been here?" The girl didn't answer. A sudden scream echoed from deep in the cave. Not a child. Not human either. Clay grabbed both kids, one in each arm, and ran. Outside, the light felt violent. The dog was waiting, tail low, ears pinned. But it turned the moment it saw him, limping back down the trail toward town. He followed. He didn't stop until they hit the edge of the woods, and his radio crackled to life. "This is Mercer," he gasped. "I need medical." "Two minors. Breathing but weak." Location: Old Miller Cave, just west of God's Elbow Ridge. "Copy. Copy, Mercer." EMTs en route. He collapsed to his knees, arms shaking from the weight of the kids. The dog sat beside him, silent. When the ambulance arrived, Clay tried to follow, but dispatch ordered him to stay and file report. He didn't argue. He just turned back toward the cave. That growl was in his head, and the girl's last words hadn't been nonsense. There was someone else in there once. Maybe still was. The next morning came with a hard frost and headlines. "Missing children found alive in abandoned mine shaft." Officer Mercer hailed as local hero. "Mystery dog vanishes after rescue." The town of Elmsworth hadn't had front-page news in years, other than bake sale fundraisers and hunting license fees going up. But the story moved like fire in dry grass. A cop, a stray, and two missing kids, one unconscious, the other eerily silent, rescued from the collapsed remnants of the old Miller silver shaft. Everyone had questions. No one had answers. The little boy, barely 6, was stable but unconscious. The girl, Emma, spoke only when prompted and never about the cave, or who took them there. She just said he was tall. Clay stood outside the ER window, watching her draw something on the hospital-provided paper with a dull crayon. Circles, black scribbles, a small figure with giant arms, always in the corner. The nurse said she'd gone mute for days at a time. Clay didn't blame her. That night, after the cave, he'd gone home to a cold house, poured himself 2 inches of bourbon, and stared at the wall until dawn. He hadn't called Emily, didn't check the messages, couldn't bring himself to, because something was still wrong. That growl in the dark hadn't been his imagination. The girl's drawings weren't just trauma. And that cave hadn't been empty. 2 days later, the sheriff called him in. Sheriff Tom Rourke was a broad-shouldered man with thinning hair, tobacco-stained fingers, and an old-school approach to everything. He'd known Clay since he was 17, a wiry troublemaker working off a misdemeanor by washing cruisers. Now he stared across the desk with a tired, skeptical expression. "Tell me again," Rourke said, "why you followed a stray man into the woods without backup, without a radio check, and without logging your damn location?" Clay didn't blink. "Because I trusted my gut, and if I hadn't, those kids would be corpses. You got lucky. Or I was right." The sheriff exhaled, chewing the inside of his cheek. "You think someone's living down there?" "I think someone was," Clay said. "Those kids didn't crawl in there on their own. No one's lived near God's Elbow since the shaft collapsed. We've got a crew surveying it tomorrow, but between the cave-ins and the winter runoff, it's not exactly stable. Hell, it's a miracle it didn't swallow you whole." Clay didn't respond. He could still feel the echo of that growl, deep and wet, like lungs that hadn't drawn clean air in years. Rourke leaned forward. "You want to go back, don't you?" Clay nodded. Rourke shook his head. "You're not cleared for solo recon, and I'm not authorizing a detail based on a ghost story. It's not a ghost story." Rourke leaned back. Then what is it? Clay hesitated. Then quietly, a hiding place for someone who doesn't want to be found. The volunteer survey team arrived with 2 packs of dynamite and a drone. They couldn't get to work. Clay waited at the site in case they needed law enforcement presence. He paced a trail, checked the path the dog had taken. Nothing. No prints. No sign of the animal. It was like the dog had only existed long enough to bring him there and then vanished. The girl had asked about it once. Is the dog okay? Clay had told her yes. He hoped that wasn't a lie. He hadn't told anyone what she whispered next when the nurse stepped away. He used to hit the dog when it barked too loud. That's why it ran. That night, Clay drank. Not because of the cave, or the girl, or the drawings, but because of a photo tucked in a manila envelope he hadn't looked at in 6 years. He pulled it out now, hands trembling. A baby, wrapped in blue. Hospital tag reading, Infant Boy Mercer. Emily had wanted to keep him. Clay hadn't. He'd told himself they weren't ready. That he wasn't capable of being a father. That he wouldn't ruin a child the way his own father ruined him. He hadn't told her the truth. He'd found out the baby wasn't his. But he'd lied, walked away instead, left her holding everything. She'd moved downstate, married someone else. And still sometimes he thought about that baby. How old he'd be now. 6. The same age as the boy in the cave. 3 days after the rescue, a call came in. Hikers. 2 counties over. A small cave system north of Split Rock Trail. They'd found bones. Human. Clay drove the 90 minutes in silence. When he got there, the local deputy looked green. Some of it's old, the man said. Real old. But there's at least 1 body still fresh. Maybe 2 weeks, max. Clay stepped inside. The cave smelled like mildew and piss and something worse. The bodies were barely buried. The dirt around them disturbed like something had tried to dig them up. One was a woman, late 20s, long brown hair, bruises on her arms. He recognized her face from a bulletin pinned in their own station. Vanessa Killian, reported missing by her boyfriend. Last seen hitchhiking toward Elmsworth. The other remains weren't identifiable, just fragments. Teeth, child-sized. Clay turned away, bowel rising in his throat. Whatever was happening, it wasn't random. It was ritual. He returned to the hospital. Emma was asleep. The little boy, Eli, was still unconscious, but improving. The pediatrician said both were severely malnourished, but expected to survive. The nurse on duty handed him a file. Child services will take over once they're stable, she said. But we still don't have any parent IDs. No records. No birth certificates. It's like they were born and raised off-grid. Clay opened the file. Inside were the intake forms. And a photo. A blurry Polaroid found in the girl's sock. It showed a man, tall, lean, maybe 40, with a scruffy beard and hard eyes, standing beside a trailer. The kids were in the background, barely visible. Recognize him? The nurse asked. Clay didn't answer. But he did. Barely. From the old arrest logs. Mason Dwyer, a trans-in who used to squat in the mine cabins. Picked up twice for assault. Last seen in Elmsworth 6 years ago. The same month Clay's son was born. That night, Clay returned to the cave. Alone. The mouth was still sealed by the survey team's temporary fence, but he cut through it with bolt cutters. The air was colder now, more still, like something was holding its breath. He descended with a flashlight, sidearm holstered, a second mag clipped to his belt. He made it 20 yards in when he saw the symbols, drawn in soot and dried blood on the walls. Spirals, eyes, stick-figured children with their mouths stitched, and in the corner, a shrine, made of bones, dolls, hair. At the center, a photo. Clay's breath caught in his throat. It was the same picture from the hospital file. The same man, Mason Dwyer. But behind him, scrawled in jagged charcoal on the wall, was a single word. Father. Clay didn't remember pulling his gun, only the way his arms trembled as he pointed it toward the dark behind the shrine. There was no sound now, no growl, Just a steady drip of water from the cave sealing in his breath, ragged and tight. He stepped closer, sweeping the beam over the crude altar. Bones, yes, but not all human. Some smaller. Dog bones. Others shaped wrong, twisted, as if they'd never belonged to anything born clean. At the back of the shrine, behind the photo of Mason Dwyer, something else was pinned to the rock wall. A lock of hair. Blonde. Child length. He reached out, touched it. Still soft. Still recent. His hand dropped. He turned fast, sweeping the beam behind him. The silence seemed deeper now. The air felt heavier. He could feel it. Something watching. Not from the dark, but inside it. He backed away, slowly. Then he ran. He didn't sleep that night. Sat on the porch, shotgun across his knees, staring into the woods as if Mason might come walking out. But it wasn't Mason he feared. It was the thing Mason had made. Or worse. Followed. The next morning, a phone call came from a burner number. Clay answered on instinct. A voice distorted. "Mayo, you shouldn't have taken them." Clay froze. "Who is this?" "They were clean. Pure. That's rare. You don't understand what you've done." The line went dead. He traced the call. It bounced through 3 towers, then vanished. But he recognized the voice. Mason. Alive. Watching. The sheriff didn't believe him. "This isn't your case anymore," Rourke said. "Feds are taking over. You don't know what we're dealing with." "No, you don't." Rourke leaned over the desk. "You're spiraling, Clay. You're seeing ghosts. You think Dwyer's building cult shrines in caves? You want to turn this into some satanic panic bullshit from the 80s? I've seen it. You've seen trauma. That's all." Clay left before he could say something he'd regret. He didn't come back. Instead, he drove to the edge of town and took the service road up toward the old water tower, one of the few places with a 360-degree view of Elmsworth. He climbed with a scope and a thermos of coffee, then waited until night. The wind howled across the trees. He watched the woods, the ridges, the old cabins near the mine. Around 3:14 a.m., he saw it. A lantern. Moving. No trail. No flashlight. Just an old-style kerosene lantern floating along the edge of the ridgeline. A figure followed behind. Tall, hunched, dragging something. Clay snapped a photo through the scope. Blurred, but not enough to hide the face. Mason Dwyer. Still alive. Still near the cave. The next morning, Emma finally spoke. Clay had visited the hospital again, brought her applesauce and a silent apology in his eyes. She was sitting up now, thinner but sharper. She looked at him a long time, then said, "He made us drink something." "Clay Saturday, who?" "My father." "Your real father?" "I don't know. He said we were his, but we never saw him before the cage." "Cage?" "In the back of the cave, past the wall." "What did he make you drink?" She didn't answer, but she reached for the paper and drew a jar. Inside it, something that looked like teeth floating in dark water. Clay's stomach flipped. "What happened after that?" She looked at him. "He made us sleep, so the Watcher could come." He tried to steady his voice. "The Watcher. He lives in the cave, but only comes out when there's no light. The dog tried to stop him. That's why he got hurt." Clay swallowed hard. "Emma, was that thing real?" She nodded. "Did it hurt you?" She didn't answer, just whispered, "He's still hungry." That night, Clay went back, this time with a plan. He brought flares, a military-grade flashlight, a rifle with a mounted light, and, though it twisted something deep inside him, a live-feed camera. He wasn't going to stop this. He was going to prove it. He descended alone, set the camera inside the shaft, facing the back of the cave near the shrine, activated the live feed, patched it to his laptop above ground. Then he waited. At 2:17 a.m., the feed blinked. Static, then motion. A shape moved through the frame, tall, lean, but with something off about its limbs, as though they bent wrong. The face was obscured, but the mouth, too wide, too still, and then it turned toward the camera. Clay's blood-iced. It had no eyes, just smooth flesh, pale and stretched. The screen went black. He called Rourke, told him everything. This time, the sheriff came himself. But when they entered the cave again, the shrine was gone. No bones, no photos, no symbols, just dirt, and a message scratched into the wall where the altar had been. You took mine, I'll take yours. That night, Clay went to the hospital. The front desk was empty. No nurses, no sounds, just silence. He sprinted to the children's room. Gone. Beds empty. Windows open. No signs of struggle. Just dog hair on the floor. White. Familiar. Clay ran to the lot. His truck gone. A note tucked under a rock at the edge of the curb. He won't hurt them. Yet. But you need to understand. You're part of this now. Just like I was. Just like your father before you. There was no signature. Just a symbol. A spiral. 3 days passed. Feds took over. Emma and Eli still missing. No footage from the hospital. Every hard drive wiped. Clay was suspended. Officially for interfering in an active investigation. Unofficially, because no one wanted to hear what he knew. He drank once, then threw the bottle into the fireplace. The next morning, he walked into the woods with his badge, his sidearm, and a bag full of food. He followed the dog's trail again, this time deeper, toward the other cave, the one the land surveyor hadn't mapped, because it hadn't existed until now. He disappeared for 4 days. When he returned, his hair had gone partly gray, and he carried 2 children, both alive. They wouldn't speak, not to anyone but Clay. And only one thing, it's still down there. 1 month later, the town sealed off the ridge. The cave was collapsed with charges. No official records. No further reports. But Clay stayed. He never went back to the department. He opened a dog shelter instead. Every stray brought and was treated like royalty, especially the thin white one with the cloudy eyes that showed up on his porch 2 weeks after the rescue, with one ear missing and ribs still showing. He named him Watcher, because the dog had watched over them when no one else would, and because Clay knew something else was still watching. From below, waiting, quiet resolution. Clay never found Mason's body, or his own son's adoption records. He never spoke to Emily again, but sometimes he'd sit by the fire, Emma and Eli curled beside the dog, and listen to the silence, not afraid of it, not anymore, because he understood now. Evil doesn't live in monsters. It lives in men who teach monsters how to stay hidden. And if no one else was willing to look into the dark, he would, every single time.